Now, he's known by some as an election-winning Wizard of Oz, by others as a master of the political dark arts. Australian Lynton Crosby has been a controversial presence at David Cameron's side in Downing Street, but one rarely seen in public. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has been finding out about his plans for the general election from those who know him.
Lynton Crosby is working through the summer break in London, 10,000 miles from home, surfing through polls and bringing a bit of Australian heat to our politics. He was involved in 4 of right-winger John Howard's general election campaigns in Australia.
You need somebody behind the scenes who is really in charge and is also giving sensible advice, and Lynton was very good at that.
The man who ran the Australian Labour Party campaign last year for Prime Minister Kevin Rudd is Bruce Hawker. He's done battle with Lynton Crosby in 30 state and national elections.
I don't think you should ever underestimate Lynton Crosby. I think he's a very smart, very savvy political campaigner, and I think you underestimate him at your peril.
David Cameron's lured Lynton Crosby here with money and the promise of outright control of the campaign. And a very different sort of campaign is taking shape.
Are we seeing the beginning of your policies coming through?
No, of course not. This is a Conservative Party policies.
At the heart of his approach is that left-right doesn't matter much anymore. Policies can get lost in voters' minds. Voters want to know if a politician thinks the way they do.
Australian politics, and I guess British politics as well, is far less tribal than it used to be. The old saying that my father would turn in his grave if he knew I was voting Tory or if he knew I was voting Labor, that is less frequently uttered now than what it would have been 30 or 40 years ago.
And Lynton Crosby's long practiced a technique for prizing loosened supporters off the other side.
He will try, if he runs to form, to run a wedge or a division between the Labor Party leadership and the intellectual leadership in the Labor Party and its traditional supporters. He's done that very effectively in various campaigns in Australia.
And that normally happens on issues like welfare, immigration?
Yes.
And Lynton Crosby wants to know what's worrying people on welfare, immigration, crime, almost street by street in the marginal seats, so he can tailor direct emails, letters, phone calls, his below-the-line campaign.
Lynton Crosby's brought over another Australian practice. He pioneered in the 1998 Australian election. Masses of polls, scores of them on individual marginal constituencies, on a scale never tried by a political party in this country before. The bill is thought to be close to £1 million for the polls just completed, and only David Cameron, George Osborne, very few others get to see the results.
So they work out what the anxieties are that people have about supporting a Labor candidate in an electorate or a Labor leadership or a Labor policy, and then they work like heck to get that message out to the broader electorate and to focus it into particular constituencies as well.
In messages to colleagues, David Cameron sometimes refers to Lynton Crosby as PTBN. It stands for Pass the Beer Nuts, an expression Lynton Crosby often uses when he thinks Tory strategists are becoming a bit airy-fairy or remote from voters' concerns. It's that no-nonsense approach that David Cameron hopes will help him connect with voters whose lives are a great distance from his own. Like those voters who've split off from the Tories to vote UKIP in local and European elections. And Lynton Crosby has his own Australian experience to match the Nigel Farage phenomenon.
In 1997, a blunt-speaking fish and chip shop owner, Pauline Hanson, started her own political party.
Get this clear. We are Australians.
In the 1998 general election, the One Nation Party's hard line on immigration nearly knocked John Howard out of office and secured nearly 9% of the vote.
A lot of the people who voted for Pauline Hanson were people who felt that they'd been left behind economically. Many of them lived in the less affluent regional areas of Australia. They were really people who'd missed out on the Australian affluence.
Like Nigel Farage's forces in seats like Thurrock in Essex, the Pauline Hanson troops' biggest gripe was immigration.
I should have the right to have a say in who comes into my country.
As they tried to squeeze down the One Nation insurgency, John Howard and Lynton Crosby were accused of borrowing its political clothes.
Pauline Hanson said that you'd managed to suck all her voters, or lots of her voters, into your embrace because you'd stolen her policies and her rhetoric, with Lynton Crosby at your side.
Yeah.
Is that a...
Well, she would say that, wouldn't she?
Is there any truth in it?
No.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
Bruce Hawker wonders whether his old sparring partner will go for a more hardline message if it's close to the election and the Conservatives haven't pulled back enough UKIP voters.
That's the break glass option, you know, when the polling's telling us actually they're rusted on to UKIP and they're not coming our way. That's where it gets very interesting and potentially very dangerous in a campaign, because you then really have to start changing direction. And if he starts going down the path of trying to really incorporate UKIP values and rhetoric language into Cameron's speech, then I think a lot of Tory voters on the left sort of fringe of the Tory party are going to be a bit worried about it as well. So you can end up wedging yourself.
I think Mr Cameron's underestimating UKIP, sir.
For years, Britain and Australia have seen newspapers wading into campaigns with distracting headlines, personal attacks often on Labour leaders. But the last Australian general election, many feel, took that to a new level. And that could be another Australian import heading over here.
Tony Abbott, now Prime Minister, barely had to say a negative thing about Kevin Rudd. He came out looking very sweet and Pollyanna-ish and gave very short press conferences, stuck to his message and went away.
You can see that happening to Ed Miliband.
You could easily see that being tried by Cameron, particularly if he can marshal a major media group to do what Murdoch did for the Conservative Party in Australia.
The government's got a clear plan for the direction of the economy, to deal with the issue of people's concerns, and I'm sure it'll pay dividends at the election.
The Tories are investing heavily in this man's campaign plan. The format's made in Australia, and it could be coming to a street near you soon.